I'm Sophie. Sitting here in the control booth, overlooking the factory floor that now hums with a deep, rich sound, I can't help but reflect on the events that led to this moment. It's been 6 months since the chaos, and the factory is running better than ever. But it all started with a new guy named Ryan, who thought he could come in and turn everything upside down. I've spent my whole career at this Michigan stamping plant. My parents were hard-working folks. My father was a mechanic, always tinkering with engines, and my mother was a nurse, caring for others. They instilled in me a strong work ethic and a love for problem solving. I've dedicated 32 years of my life to keeping this place running, and I know every nook and cranny of these machines. It was a typical Tuesday. The air in the plant smelled like ozone and burnt hydraulic fluid, a scent that most people might find unpleasant, but to me, it was the smell of home. I was at Station 4 on Line 3, my problem child. This 20-year-old robotics assembly was a temperamental thing. If the humidity dropped below 40%, it would start to act up. I didn't need a dashboard to tell me, I could feel it in the floorboards. The vibration would change from a smooth rhythm to a stumble. As I was tightening a sensor bracket, I felt a presence behind me. It wasn't the heavy footsteps of a shift worker in steel-toed boots. It was the click-click of expensive Italian loafers. I didn't even turn around. "You're standing in the yellow zone," I said to the air. "Unless you're rated for high-voltage maintenance, you're about to void your life insurance policy." Then, a voice said, "Sophie, right? The legacy specialist." I turned to see Ryan, the new operations director. He looked like he had just stepped out of an MBA program. His skin was smooth, his teeth were blindingly white, and his suit cost more than my first car. He was holding a tablet like it was the key to the universe and looking at my grease-stained coveralls with a mix of amusement and disgust. I corrected him, "System specialist." I wiped a smudge of lithium grease onto an old rag. "And you must be the new optimization guru corporate sent down to tell us we need to do more with less." He introduced himself as Ryan and offered his hand. It looked so soft that I was afraid I'd bruise it if I shook it. I just held up my oily wrench instead. He retracted his hand and wiped it on his pants. "Actually, Sophie, I'm the director of modernization. We're looking to pivot." I repeated the word pivot. It tasted like tin in my mouth. "Is that fancy talk for fixing things that aren't broken?" He laughed, a hollow, dry laugh. "That's the thing about legacy mindsets, Sophie. You see not broken, I see inefficient. I've been reviewing the logs. You spend 40% of your time on manual overrides for Line 3. That's wasted bandwidth." I wanted to explain that Line 3 wasn't just a machine. It was a collection of quirks and patches that had evolved over 2 decades. The manual overrides were me finessing a firmware conflict that the original manufacturer stopped supporting ages ago. But I knew he wouldn't listen. He was too busy listening to the voice in his head, imagining himself as the hero who would save the quarterly earnings report. He told me there was a meeting in 20 minutes for all senior staff, where he'd unveil his roadmap. I told him I'd be there as soon as I made sure Line 3 didn't eat the next pallet of sheet metal. As he walked away, stepping carefully over a coil of pneumatic hose, my gut tightened. It was a feeling I'd never felt before, like a storm was coming. I finished adjusting the sensor, and Line 3 hummed back into a perfect rhythm. I patted the safety cage. "Don't worry, girl, I won't let the shiny man hurt you." But as I walked towards the conference room, I couldn't shake the feeling. I stopped by my locker. Hidden behind a stack of manuals for an obsolete PLC system was a small USB drive. It was a backup of a backup, a ghost image of the entire plant's logic architecture that I'd compiled over the years. I took it out for the first time in 5 years and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. The conference room was freezing. Ryan stood at the head of the table, and behind him, a PowerPoint presentation glowed with words like synergy, holistic, and right sizing. He welcomed the team and started pacing. I've been observing for the last 2 weeks, and I'm shocked at the reliance on tribal knowledge. If Sophie gets hit by a bus, line 3 stops. If Tom from maintenance wins the lottery, the HVAC dies. This is unacceptable risk. We're moving to a fully standardized cloud-based ERP system. Tom raised his hand. His knuckles were scarred from years of hard work. Sir, with all due respect, the cloud doesn't know that the hydraulic seals on press 4 expand differently in January than in July. The sensors don't catch that. We do. Ryan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's exactly the problem, Tom. You're relying on feel. We need data, and we're going to get it. Starting today, we're auditing all contracts and looking for redundancies. Then, Ryan turned to me. Sophie, since your role is primarily maintenance of legacy systems, and we're eliminating those legacy systems, HR will set up a meeting with you later today to discuss your transition. I said flatly, transition? He waved his hand dismissively. It's just a standard review, paperwork. In the modern age, we don't need artisans. We need operators. I didn't show any emotion. I just nodded slowly. Understood. As the meeting ended, Tom squeezed my shoulder. This is bullshit, Sophie, he muttered. I gave him a small smile. He wants to modernize. Let's see what the factory looks like without the tribal knowledge. I went back to my desk, a cluttered corner of the engineering bay. I sat down at my terminal. Ryan thought he was just firing an employee, but he didn't realize he was pulling the plug on a well-oiled machine. I brought up the command console and started copying and encrypting files. I wasn't stealing, I was just taking my personal property, which happened to include the only functional map of the system's logic gates. Later, I went to the HR office. It smelled like vanilla air freshener trying to mask the smell of crushed dreams. Ryan and a young woman named Lily from HR were sitting across from me. Ryan leaned back and tented his fingers. As we discussed, the pivot to Digital 4.0 makes your skill set obsolete. It's not personal, it's evolution. You're like a carburetor in a world of fuel injection. I said, so, 32 years of keeping this plant running with 99.8% uptime as a carburetor? He pointed at me. Exactly. We need to streamline your contract. It's bloated with seniority bonuses. Lily pushed a separation agreement across the desk. It offered 2 weeks of severance for every 5 years of service, contingent on a non-disparagement clause and a full handover of all company assets. The numbers were insulting. It was barely enough to buy a used car. I asked about the handover. You want me to train the new guys? Show them where the bodies are buried? Ryan laughed his dry, rattling laugh. Sophie, please. We have the documentation, the schematics. We have the cloud. The new team starts Monday. They're certified on the new ERP. They don't need you. He picked up a folder labeled contract renewal and fed it into a shredder. Watching my future turn into confetti, the last shred of loyalty I had for the company vanished. I signed the agreement without reading the fine print. I handed over my ID badge, company phone, and keys, but I lied when I said that was everything. The USB drive in my pocket felt warm against my leg. Ryan said security would escort me out. I looked him in the eye and said, "Good luck with the modernization, Ryan. The machines have a personality. Treat them right." He scoffed, "Machines are machines. They do what they're coded to do." I just said softly, "Yes, they certainly do." On my way to the parking lot, a security guard named Jake, who I'd known since he was a rookie, walked beside me. He looked miserable. "I'm sorry, Sophie. This is messed up." I put on my sunglasses and said, "Ryan is an optimizer. I'm sure he'll optimize the breaker." I got into my beat-up truck and sat there for a moment, looking back at the factory. I pulled out my personal phone and opened a secure app connected to a remote desktop node I'd set up years ago for emergency diagnostics. Ryan's IT team had revoked my company credentials, but they hadn't found the backdoor account named Admin Ghost buried in the subdirectory of the legacy lighting control system. I checked the status. System online, user Admin Ghost with permissions. I didn't do anything yet. Revenge is a dish best served cold. I just made sure the door was unlocked. I drove to my sister's place in Traverse City. I was going to drink wine, sleep in, and wait for the inevitable phone call. I knew that legacy systems were the foundation, and if you ripped out the foundation, the whole house would fall. I thought it would take 3 or 4 days, but it only took 2. The first 24 hours after I left were peaceful. Ryan probably thought he'd successfully cut out the dead weight. But entropy is a patient hunter. Line 2, which handles the precision welding for automotive chassis frames, started having problems. At 8 a.m. On Monday, Ryan pushed a button on his tablet to reroute the logic controls from the local servers I maintained to his new cloud-based ERP system. He called it seamless integration. By 10:15 a.m. The timing drift started. The smooth hiss-pop of the welders turned into a stuttering sound. The robotic arms started to hesitate. Big Dave shouted to stop the line, but Ryan waved him off, saying it was just the calibration phase. At 10:45 a.m. Arm 4 tried to weld a joint that Arm 2 hadn't placed yet. It welded the air, swung around, and clipped the safety cage. Sparks flew, and the emergency stop was triggered. The line ground to a halt. Ryan barked over the intercom, "Maintenance, get that line moving." What's wrong with the hardware? That was his first mistake. Blaming the hardware. Tom and his crew swarmed the machine. They checked the motors and voltage, but everything was fine. The problem was in the timing. Tom shouted up to Ryan, "The new system is lagging. We need to revert to the local control loop." Ryan shouted back, red-faced, "No reverts. The cloud is the standard. Fix the latency on your end." Tom yelled, "You can't fix the speed of light with a wrench." Meanwhile, in the server room, the new IT team, a bunch of kids who knew Python but couldn't identify a servo motor, were sweating. They tried to force the new code to overwrite the old logic blocks, but they couldn't. Every time they tried to delete my legacy protocol files, the system denied access. Error 4003 forbidden. Admin rights required. Ryan stormed into the server room. "Why is line 2 down? I promised corporate a 15% efficiency boost by noon." The head IT guy stammered, "There's a ghost in the machine, sir. A legacy partition that controls the critical timing. We can't override it without the root password." Ryan screamed, "Hack it. It's just code. Brute force it." The IT guy warned, "If we brute force it, we might corrupt the safety protocols. The whole system could lock up." Ryan said, "I don't care. We're losing money. Bypass the safety protocols if you have to. Just get the line moving." Back in Traverse City, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my Ghost app. Safety override initiated. Thermal limits disabled on press 4. Collision detection disabled on line 2. I stared at the screen. He had actually done it. He had turned off the safeguards. I took a sip of tea. I could have stopped him, but he had shredded my contract and called my life's work garbage. "Let it burn," I whispered. At 1:30 p.m. Line 2 started up again. Ryan stood on the gantry, looking like a captain steering a ship through a storm. But he didn't realize he was ordering the crew to scuttle the hull. The sensor on Station 5 failed. Normally, a sensor failure would trigger a soft halt, but Ryan had bypassed that. The robot arm swung forward and drove the welder through the hydraulic clamp. The sound was like a gunshot followed by a scream of tearing metal. Hydraulic fluid sprayed everywhere, and a fire broke out. An hour later, the damage report came in. Robot Axis 3 was destroyed. Replacement cost $22,000. The hydraulic clamp was a total loss, cost $6,000. Downtime was estimated at a minimum of 48 hours. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, called. His voice boomed over the speakerphone. Why am I looking at a 0 on line 2? And why did I just get an automated alert about a fire suppression discharge? Ryan stammered, we encountered a minor hardware anomaly during the migration. A sensor malfunction. Mr. Thompson barked, we replaced those sensors 6 months ago. Sophie handled that project. She told me they were good for 5 years. Ryan deflected, well, Sophie isn't here to verify that. Her legacy configuration might have masked the defect. Mr. Thompson asked, masked it or managed it? Ryan said it was just a hiccup and they'd have it back online by the second shift. Mr. Thompson growled, if we miss the shipment for Ford on Friday, it's not going to be a sensor we replace. Ryan turned to the IT lead, a kid named Alex. Fix it. Why did the override fail? Alex whispered, it did exactly what you told it to. Ignored the error. But there was a secondary command. The system tried to access a subroutine called Safet v4. The path was blocked because we revoked the user permissions for the author. Ryan asked, who was the author? Alex gulped, Sophie. Ryan hissed, scrub it. Delete all references to her files. Build a new safety patch from scratch. I don't want her ghost haunting my machines. Alex said writing a new safety kernel from scratch would take weeks, but Ryan gave him until the next morning. By Wednesday morning, the factory was in chaos. Line 2 was still down, and Line 1 was running at half speed. Ryan looked like he had aged 10 years in 48 hours. His suit was wrinkled, and his confidence was gone. The IT team had spent the night trying to scrub my digital DNA from the mainframe, but every time they rebooted the main server, my user profile restored itself. Ryan demanded to know how that was possible. Alex showed him a schematic and explained that the core kernel of the factory's operating system checked for my master signature on boot up. If it didn't find it, it initiated a system restore from a hidden partition. Ryan was cornered. A smart man would have called me and begged for help, but he was too proud. He ordered a factory reset. A grizzled technician named Stan, who had been at the factory since the 90s, warned him, you don't want to do that, son. Factory default means the settings from 1998. You'll lose the calibration data for every machine on the floor. Ryan yelled, I don't care about 1998. I have a cloud backup. Stan asked dryly, the cloud backup that failed to sync because of the latency issues? Ryan paused but then said, do it. Factory reset. Wipe the legacy partition. Alex typed the command with shaking hands. The screens in the control room flickered and then went black. The factory went silent. Suddenly, a message popped up on the main screen. Did you just try to format my brain, Ryan? That was rude. Ryan stared at the screen, his mouth open. Alex whispered, she's watching us. It's in the walls. Ryan shrieked, she's a hacker. Trace the signal. Call the police. Stan stood up and put on his coat. She's not hacking. You just tried to break into a house she built, and you triggered the burglar alarm. I'm going home. Call me when you hire an adult. On Thursday morning, the factory had been dark for 16 hours. Delivery trucks were lined up at the loading docks, and the just-in-time supply chain was in shambles. My phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Tom. His voice was tight with panic. Sophie, he's lost his mind. He's trying to bypass the digital lockouts mechanically. He's got a crew of contractors in the power cage, hot wiring the main bus. I sat up straight. Hot wiring? That's 480 volts. If they bypass the phase sequence protection, the motors will run backward. It'll tear the place apart. Tom said he was in the parking lot and had evacuated his guys, but the morning shift was still inside. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money, it was about people's lives. I thought fast. I remembered the dead man switch I'd programmed years ago. It was a fail-safe in case of a catastrophic cyber attack or a hostile takeover of the controls. I told Tom to get everyone back to the fence line. I'm going to pull the plug. Permanently. I opened my messaging app and typed execute to the contact Grace Pen main bus, which was a cellular modem wired directly into the master breaker panel. I hovered my thumb over the send button, imagining Ryan in the power cage, sweating and screaming. Then,